Okay, yeah. Hello, good afternoon. Hello, welcome to Connect Africa. So this time we are streaming about why we have international humanitarian presence in Africa and why we as an African should be worried, why countries, African states have to be concerned, having an international humanitarian body or any international body for such a long time in the country. So to discuss that, we have Sister Choice Ufuoma Okoro. Welcome, Sister Choice.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much. It's a pleasure to be here, Mallet. Thank you for the privilege.
Thank you. So I'll just say briefly, Sister Choice Ufuoma she's from Nigeria and she has worked for the UN office, UN-OCHA. So I think namely humanitarian response, coordinated human action, if I believe. But currently she is not working for UN-OCHA office in Ethiopia anymore. She's relocated to another place. Welcome, Sister Choice, again, and tell us about yourself before we jump to the first question. Just give us a background.
I'm Choice Ufuoma, yes, Nigerian, as you mentioned, very proudly African, and have had the privilege while working with the United Nations to serve in many African countries, and it's been a joy. I've found a lot of homes in those places, and I think I presently am serving in Southeast Asia. I'm heading an OCHA office there where I'm working with a fantastic team as well. So I've had the privilege to work with many people, but have as well as 14 years working with OCHA at the UN. Prior to that, I worked as a human rights for 8 years, worked as a human rights officer for 8 years, then did some work as well before that, working around gender issues around Africa as well. So I have close to about 25 years work experience. As a young teenager, I was in South Africa when, as in my late 20s, I was in South Africa when the referendum was being done to get apartheid out, and was in Guguletu, in the Guguletu, in the townships, jubilating with fellow Africans. So I've served in many different ways in the last close to 30 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Interesting. We have the right person indeed to explain to us to the questions that we have today. We are going to discuss. So just for our viewers to give them a little bit of, a detail or what to expect from this discussion, we are going to discuss about why do we have these international bodies or humanitarian organizations in a country, and why do we have them for such a long time, why we have to be concerned. And she will tell us also her experience in Ethiopia, and then why many, more and more African countries, in spite of their resources, are asking for the presence of these international humanitarian organizations. And is it the same? Does the same apply to the Western world, or is it only in Africa? So all this will be raised in our discussion. So just to start with Sister Choice, let's say many of us do not understand how even the international humanitarian organization become present in our in our all respective countries, and they are there for such a long time, and year to year you hear a predicted story of the country. For example, I am from Ethiopia. I hear there will be a drought for next year, such and such millions of people will need, and you wonder, aren't we working? Aren't our farmers are producing? And they are there for such a long time. So but there is a process for them to be there. So just walk us through how they become present in a country, and then why they are there for such a long time, and why African countries should be concerned.
Yeah, I say, in 1994, a department was established by the United Nations. It's called the Department of Humanitarian Affairs. It was part of the United Nations Secretariat. And the function of the Department of Humanitarian Affairs, which has now become OCHA, which I'm working for, they changed the name 2 decades ago, was set up When you have crisis, sudden onset disasters, it could be an earthquake, a typhoon, flooding that overwhelms the capacity of the country to immediately address them. The UN has a system that can move in into to support a country for some time, 6 months, then hand over and leave. And that is the intent. Is for sudden onset disaster. So these are international humanitarian actors who move into this situation and they leave. But just like international humanitarian system have started expanding, the whole aid industry has exploded. International humanitarian system have grown, and I think it started being driven by perverse incentive. I started speaking up against this, having worked in many contexts that I saw was development related. I go to some countries where they want to appeal, and I ask, why do you want to appeal? Why do you want to go out there now? Let me give you an example. For 2022, in December last year, about many countries, close to 30 or 26, came out to appeal for international humanitarian assistance, which I call begging, basically. The events I had mostly in Europe and North America. Basically, they are saying, a notice was sent out. 14 of those countries are from Africa. There are 2 regional appeals, so the majority are from Africa. Last year was the same. These countries declared that they are going to face crisis in 2022 by December 2021. So they're already preparing themselves to face crisis that they would need appeal for. The predominant sudden onset natural disasters happen in Southeast Asia. They don't happen in Africa. We had the Mozambique Ida that happened, the cyclone 2 years ago, but that is rare. It's amazing that we have a tool that was set up to support sudden onset disaster and leave. It's predominantly spreading every year in Africa where we don't have a sudden onset disaster. And these are some of the challenges. So if you have the 16 countries, 14 countries and 2 regional bodies that are going to appeal, we don't have the money yet. When we hear sometimes, we're going to be raising about 2.5 billion or 200 billion for humanitarian assistance. I think there are many African countries who allow themselves to go on the appeal because they think maybe we're going to get like 300 million. No, I've been trying to tell them that we don't have the money yet. Through the year, we will go out there, international humanitarian actors, we go out to the world and start begging for that money. Basically, the 14 countries that are listed, plus the 2 regional bodies, they will have words like crisis, poverty, malnutrition, facing famine. Those are the, catastrophic humanitarian crisis. So those are the kind of words that would predominantly be used in the context of those 14 countries that are appealing. So by the time the year ends, the full amount will not be raised, but you will think of some of the countries, and that is what you will hear. So there are 16 African countries, including regions, that are going to be going out to the public to explain that they have problems, they are suffering, they are miserable, there's insecurity, and widespread insecurity, and allowed international actors to come and help them, and they are begging for money. Who will want to go on to visit? Who will want to go for tourism in a place like that? Why would I leave my country and go to a place like that? And this is the way the international humanitarian system works. So any African country that puts itself out there does not reflect on why, then they will face a future where their name will be spread out there. Now, there are some countries that have been on the begging list for over 2 decades. Democratic Republic of Congo, with all its riches and resources, is one of the countries that have been begging for international humanitarian aid for the last over 20 years. Do you know, it was reported, and this is true, when Ebola was discovered in Goma, a woman said it was divine favor. You know why? Because she felt international actors will now come and they'll be able to get maybe jobs. Another challenge there is that when international humanitarian actors come with all the vans and all, they come as a presence of affluence. That was not what the UN intended it to be. It's supposed to be, now it's become some of the highest employers. So when international actors come, there's a bloated economy in the community where they work. So hotels prices spiral. Most of the accommodation, the locals cannot afford them. It brings with it, so you can imagine Democratic Republic of Congo with all the wealth. We all have cell phones because of Democratic Republic of Congo. Electric cars these days, the resources to power them come from the Congo. But Congolese are one of the poorest. Congo goes to the international community to beg for international aid and has been doing that for 20 years. Now, as I mentioned, the rationale for having international humanitarian action is that you have a crisis, and that crisis surpasses your ability to address them. So when you leave an international humanitarian presence in your country for over 20 years with no exit strategy, what are you saying? You're saying you've been having a crisis for 20 years. And this is what has been expanding in Africa. Every year, these countries that are launched, that are begging, are announced, Africans just operate in oblivion to it. They're, I think, oblivious to the impact, the implication to the country. They just announced 16 countries, this amount, and the numbers grow every year. You know, the industry is an employer of many people, you know, and it's growing. So every year the numbers increase. And I've challenged some of my colleagues. If we are effective, the number should reduce. Why is it that it increases every year? You know, so this is how it works. Nigeria is one of the most recent members into it. Good news too, there are many countries that realize the damaging impact and they leave. Kenya is one of them. Kenya is not on the list of countries begging. There are some countries that have emerged from it. I mean, we have to look at some successes too. Look at Rwanda, for instance. When they had the crisis, then they needed some aid, and it came, and they finished with it, and they moved on. They are no longer appealing for international humanitarian assistance every year. But it took a leadership that was very clear of what the impact was for Rwanda to move away. Now, to finish here, and I know it's long, to finish here, you know, international humanitarian presence must be rationalized. That's why the narrative of our presence must talk about the negatives. So I could fly into Ethiopia, see all the Lalibela, beautiful. I will go search for that place in Somali region or one remote village and use it as an image to raise funds. So it's the negative that sell. We brand Africa with the negative so that we can rationalize international humanitarian presence. So any other activities, any other African countries are taking on, economic activities, rebranding does not make sense. If while you're rebranding, there's some active global machine that promotes the region as conflict ridden, you know, illness, disease ridden, the worst kind of scenario. How can you rebrand yourself positively? I finished. Let's look at Ebola. Let's look at COVID-19. Isn't it interesting that the minute COVID came, even before we noted its presence in Africa, there was already in the machine rowing that the people will be dead on the streets, fundraising. For when did that all happen? They wanted to disease the continent by all means, and that is what that is my passion. That's why I'm saying protracted international humanitarian presence. Africa should be concerned because any activities we're taking on is meaningless. It's like pouring water in a basket, you know, with holes. You're just investing in different activities. Let's promote tourism. No, it's not going to happen because like I emphasized again, there's an international machine, oiled, huge global system that is promoting the worst of Africa under the name of international humanitarian assistance. Thank you, Malet.
Wow. Yeah, no, thank you very much, Sister Choice Ufuoma, for that. But help us to understand, or help me to understand that you said, I mean, you touched a key point where, you know, it takes a leadership for a country to say, okay, I no more need this humanitarian organization in my territory. Okay, so what is the difference, you know, for those who are not having the exit plan and who do not have the courage to kick or to say, okay, leave, I am done? Or is it because still they are into a problem or into a crisis?
It has become, sadly, like I said, it has started growing as a machine. It's literally almost grown out of control. That's why I'm saying this is the time to control. Right now, most African leaders whose country go on aid, they are literally held to ransom by threats of sanctions and all if they don't allow it in. You see, that is the trick now. Now, it has become so powerful, it is used. The language international humanitarian access is used to undermine sovereignty. In fact, I would go as far as saying some of the insecurity that is spreading widely across Africa is because most African leaders, they can't even enforce security in their own area. I'll give you an example. When, look at Donald Trump, when after Donald Trump lost and some Americans, marched into the Capitol. Capitol. I mean, they were treated as criminals. It was clear. Nobody said, okay, Biden, come and negotiate with this group. Or let's look at humanitarian corridors. They were caught and treated as criminals. That was who they were. They were not non-state actors. They were not insurgents. They didn't give them any nice name to legitimize what they did. But if somebody can come to in Africa and bomb a military base and they are going to ask you, negotiate. Come, let's negotiate. Where's the humanitarian corridor? Using that kind of international language legitimizes criminality these days in some of these countries that are being forced. So some countries are not even aware that they are going out to beg. And this is why. When the United Nations the UN come into a country, they come in, the country, the national authorities have to agree and accept the resident coordinator. But those who come in with the humanitarian side don't come in through that negotiation. They come in. I mean, they enter and it spreads. It's almost, sometimes I use a statement like, it's almost like a parasite that just like a weed. And I'm saying this if it's not right. If it's not presented right, if it's not implemented right. So I'm saying this, yes, when we say this, they say it's African leaders' fault. A lot of them are held literally being bamboozled. There are some I know who've tried and they can't. They are there embarrassed. In fact, if you go through the media, the government of many countries have come forward, the prime ministers and presidents, to say, no, you international actors, you are exaggerating the situation. But right now, as I tell you, there are sanctions being most African countries are threatened with sanctions when they call for a change. In Nigeria, for instance, where we've had the IDP camp, there's a governor from Borno State, is just my hero right now. He is putting his foot down and said, this is not what we asked for. We want people to live in dignity. The camps are not solving the situation. The international humanitarian presence come with a lot of other stuff, other elements into a community. And this man has seen it and he's saying no. But he's going to be threatened. He might be called. He's putting the lives of his people at risk by not taking this support. Different messages will come. So our leaders are not as bad as people think. We were unaware as this was growing. I am able to speak this way about this because I've worked in it. Because I know it takes working in it closely to see the dynamic. I mean, to see what even the notion of neutrality, humanitarian principles of neutrality, which says, it cannot be aligned with the government. Who funds international humanitarian response? Who pays for it? It also, like late Thomas Sankara said, he said, there are many ways imperialism and neocolonialism come into a country. And he mentioned some of them. It's aid, food aid. There are many ways. and so you have a presence in. So our leaders, it's getting almost too late for them to do anything. That's why I'm speaking up. I think Rwanda was able to do it before Kenya. I worked in Kenya and we did a lot of work. I mean, Kenya is a tourist destination. They need to be very careful with going out there to appeal. They need tourism, I mean, when I do my work, I'll give you another example. Do you know there are leaders who have been almost penalized, in a way for not agreeing to go for the worst case scenario in a crisis?
Wow.
There's all the debate between cholera and watery diarrhea. If you say you have cholera, you get more money immediately. International funding comes, but your export of livestock goes down. People forget that one thing you give, you lose. You lose. So the leaders need to work hard. I think African leaders are very aware, but they are working in a dynamic right now where they are demonized very easily. And a lot of these countries that are going out to beg, one of the ways they push them out, most of their government, the leaders in those countries, after a while, they start getting a bad name. They start giving them a bad name. Because there are some workers, international actors, who believe being negative on the government means you're neutral. You're supposed to go into the country and not be positive about the government because it's perceived that you're not neutral. But you're very positive about your own country in Europe and begging them for funding. You do your paperwork, make sure you give account for the funding. So our leaders know, but they have to, it takes a battle to get this element out and move to the much needed work of development, because people get salaries in it. There are huge titles. There was a team I worked with and they were saying humanitarian celebrities. I said, please, you don't say that in my continent. You don't call somebody from Europe a humanitarian celebrity is coming. I mean, some of these high level, they are treated like celebrities. And I'm saying we should not be proud of this. There are some international NGOs that want to celebrate in certain countries. We're celebrating 60 years being here. I said you shouldn't celebrate that. You should be crying. That includes the UN too, because the UN is what we make of it. So that's why I speak. I said the UN is our own. It's not for some others against Africa. Africa is part of owning the UN. So we have to actively invest a lot of time to make it work for Africa. Right now, the modus operandi, the interpretation of what is required is too tilted against us. So you have a situation where, as Africans, all we do is to be passive recipients of international humanitarian presence. How active are we in defining who is the face of that? What makes somebody part of who helps? Who is the giver, who is the receiver? All these are dynamics we Africans need to deconstruct and review. And as a UN person, and I say this happily, the UN is what we make of it. Sadly, Africans treat the UN as an institution of affluence when it comes to when they sit in Africa. And of course, we drive around in very big cars. So it's very easy to think. So sometimes I meet some journalists when I go to some certain countries I'm heading. I'm saying, challenge us. Ask me what is my impact. Challenge me. Don't ask me where there are job opportunities and what is happening here. Yeah, there are there are many ways we can get rich. Donald Trump told us all that his friends come to Africa to be rich. So we know there's a way to make money in Africa. We have the resources, but most of us are so busy getting excited, doing contract proposals to work in certain organization where your only qualification is you're able to be negative about your country and being negative about your government. Then you are qualified. You understand? You're qualified to work with us. Continue to give us negative information. So we'll continue to raise funds. We write proposals. That is what is happening with international humanitarian presence across Africa. And that should change. The UN wants to be effective. And we cannot have international humanitarian presence for 20 years plus. We must sit down with countries that have had it for 20 years plus and discuss exit strategy. What we need to be in place for us to get out. We cannot use international humanitarian action and presence to distract from the looting, the theft of Congo's resources. So every year we look at Congo begging for international humanitarian aid, and billions and trillions are being stolen. They call it, illicit financial flow. Tons of them are piling away from Africa, but we just throw a report on it. Why don't we have an annual event calling attention to where the money went to? It's very easy to call attention. Let's raise funds. Let's have annual event of amount of money that was stolen from Africa this year. Let's give that visibility. The charity branding of Africa has gone on for too long. It has to stop. It's a lie. We have children whose lives are going to grow here. Not all of us can run to Europe, and even those who've gone there, their lives are not, they don't have a life. There are many Africans trapped in Libya. And Libya is one of the countries that is asking for international humanitarian funding. What is it asking it for? It's to help keep Africans away from Europe. They're all refugees refugees in Libya, suffering. And we don't want to talk about the number of Africans who die en route in the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
All this is misinformation about what opportunities we have in different parts of the world. And the charity branding of Africa has become an economy. It's a perverse economy driven by perverse incentives. And we should work with our leaders to become aware. Let us all be aware of where they are, what they are doing, watch them, hold them accountable, and ensure there's an exit strategy. Thank you, Malet.
Thank you very much, sister. Really, you are shedding light. You are enlightening us. I mean, as you tell us, why how a leader of a country, once that leader commits himself or herself to get out of this situation, face a problem, sanctions, and other problems. I was actually retrieving from my mind what happened in Ethiopia for the past one. It all happened in front of our eyes. And so I think maybe it's better to take that case to understand the minute that the prime minister said we want to be independent, for example, we want to self-sustain in feeding ourselves, to self-sustain ourselves, to grow wheat and not to import. And a lot of that money that comes from these international organizations is actually, it's not for free, they are bringing those foods. So it would be nice if in terms of figures, if you can give us perspectives. And what happens also in the country, are we not growing wheat? Aren't our farmers growing sorghum or whatever they are importing? What will happen to what we are producing the minute they start to import that as a charity? And also together, it will be good if you can tell us your experience. I read this from your post that you, back, I think 3 years ago, you happened to visit an IDP, specifically in the northern part of Ethiopia, and where what they wanted you to produce as a report and what you have observed wasn't the same. So as a result, there was something that made that resulted that's related to your relocation. So if you are comfortable to tell us about that, it will help us a lot to understand what's going on.
Just to say, anybody who knows me, I'm non-political. I'm typically I'm non-partisan. I don't get involved in politics at all. I look at the quality of a leader, and then look at the country, how it's processed. So while I was serving in Ethiopia, which was indeed a very meaningful work to me, I was very impressed by the country, because I came when you had the when you the possibility of El Nino drought was looming, and there was concerns, in terms of the impact on food, nutrition, and all. And when we arrived in Ethiopia, we found out that the government had good systems in place that allowed us to mitigate the worst case scenario. Ethiopia was able to survive that very well. Another issue that came up was a political transition, which we witnessed as well. Well, as a humanitarian worker, we stay away from it. But we did observe, I did observe, I'm speaking personally in this interview, not as the UN staff. Also, I did observe a very smooth transition. Because there was speculation, expectation, no. And in it all emerged, perhaps one of the world's best leaders. That's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. I say that openly, because I saw him. And if you ask me, I don't actually know the difference between political parties in Ethiopia. I never got those names. But I saw him emerge and take certain actions that I thought was moving towards peace. I thought could be emulated elsewhere. A smooth transition, inviting the exile back home, ensuring forgiveness, releasing those in prison, pushing forward a message of harmony, forgiveness, and strengthening regional harmony by conceding the land to Eritrea. I just thought his cabinet, 50% of his cabinet women, he appointed a president woman, and really enthusiastic. He was looking into building Africa unity. He has that approach, just charismatic, dynamic. I was cheering. I said, this is what we need for Africa. I said, Abiy Ahmed is not just the prime minister for Ethiopia. He is Africa's. He's our own. He's made us proud. He made me so proud to be an African, seeing how well that man worked. And I won't lie, the notion, I've always felt that there were some predictable long-term issues like drought in Ethiopia that required long-term solution. I saw it. But There were many stories of my role in Ethiopia was working to develop communication to raise awareness for crisis. And my approach has always been crisis should not be wasted. Every crisis should build national character. And that's what happens in the West, where you hear a major disaster. They speak to themselves, we will rise above this, we will rise above this. You know, but in the case of Africa, it's like even before it happens, there's speculation that it might happen. And in this one case, there was lots of speculation through the political transition. There's some conflict here, some conflict there. We have an IDP crisis. IDP crisis. And as a communication person, Choice designed it. I said, I don't see anything. It would be hard for me to say countries falling apart, with IDPs when I'm in a hot spring, I'm having fun. I said it's hard for me to develop that kind of message of saying catastrophic humanitarian disaster emerging. I said, no, I said, okay, let me go capture the pictures of these IDPs. So I went on mission to Mekele. The first place I was taken to was a school. I went in the newly built school, really nice. I counted there were about 48 people. And basically, I spoke to them. They said, sorry, we don't need food aid. We just need money to be resettled from here. I said, sure. We went with 3 huge vans. I said, if we Land Cruisers, I said, if we sold 2, we'll be able to help these 48 people. I was arguing. I said, somebody wanted to say, let's send key messages of how horrible. I said, no. The kids here look healthier than your children. I'm not going to exaggerate what I've not seen. They said, there's another one not far away. I went, about 98 people. So I said, I'm sorry, I don't have any compelling image, any photograph to make a case regarding some huge crisis that needs to be, that is, so I came back, I was told, well, we're already sending that message out, so we have to. I said, but we can always say that there's not that much crisis. There are displaced people. Cash transfer can help. There are ways we can help them. But we don't want to send a message that is not true. That's not what the UN is all about. That's not what the UN stands for. The UN says international humanitarian assistance is based on need, evidence-based. Evidence means seeing it. Too many people call it evidence. They are speculating. They are guessing that if 2 people displaced, then there are more. I'll give you another example. This is Ethiopia too. There was supposed to be a huge malnutrition crisis happening in somewhere in Mali region. Malnutrition, children, under 5 malnourished. So we went to a hospital to see them. I saw a mother with 1 child and another man who had the ankle. And one of the donors said, oh, I've seen really horrible things, so I would give some money. And my mind, I'm thinking, what did you see? It's some of it right now. There are not enough visuals to back some of the things we see, and that's what we want to put. Show us. Let's see. Where these things are, because I've been on the field, I've gone around, and I say it very confidently. Without the negative picture that is poured on Africa, we can go to these places on vacation. We can go on vacation and have the best, but that's not going to happen, because how can it happen? Because if you think you think Mekele or somewhere has some huge crisis, nobody will go there. And you know what was so funny? When we went on the mission to find IDPs in Mekele, a stadium was being commissioned by the Prime Minister at the same time, in the same town. I mean, you see what I mean? So these are 2 stories competing here.
Yeah.
So I'm supposed to say this is huge crisis. Oh, IDP crisis, Ethiopia is falling apart in a town that was commissioning a stadium. I mean, it's yeah, that's
Yeah.
my experience.
It's yeah,
So,
very.
and I keep on giving the message. I keep on repeating it. The UN is what we make it, and the huge part of the responsibility falls on us Africans who work in the system, who work in the UN. We have a responsibility. Too often, some of us just enjoy the perks, go with the flow, and do what we know is not right. We are living in a country. I come from a village. And there are sometimes we've gone on mission. I said, this is not a disaster zone. This is a village. When I was young, my parents would take me to my village on the holidays. They were mud houses. They were, which are now environmentally better for the world right now. There were the streams, and I had big hair. I was skinny, and I bet if at any of those assessment mission has driven by, taking a photo of me, I would have been called. Basically, they could use me to respond. Because it's a view, the point of view, how we look at things. So we Africans who work in that system, we know. So when I go to some of these, I said, no. This is a healthy. No, you can't tell us all. We are not just tools for you to raise funds for your institutional survival. It's almost like Africa is a ready zone for anybody to come. Just pick anywhere and say there's a problem here, and you can raise funds in your own place and start a career. So yes, God leaders have said situations are exaggerated. Yes, and I said it to those countries who appeal. We will talk bad about your countries. We have to raise. We are not going to say. We have to raise funds. How am I going to raise funds when you have agreed to beg? Through the year, we say how horrible things are for you, how miserable you are, how incapable you are. So let's raise funds and bring to your country and bring capable people to help you solve your problem. And what is that problem really? That's the question we have to ask. These countries that have gone to beg for international humanitarian aid, what exactly is it they're asking for to be done? Because they are development funding as well. There's development funding. There are other funds that are given. So what exactly is this extra one? What is it going to do? And I'm not asking this to say let's not support countries who have crisis. I believe we should. I believe, as I would love to go to Colorado and be sent as an international staff to help in the wildfires raging there. I would love to. I would love to do a peace program to address the gun violence in the United States. I would love to. So let's all work for each other, not to turn it all. This is the way the Africa now is present in the global arena as a charity domain, as a domain of charity, and we take it. It happened before, but it was not as organized as it is right now. It is expanding every year. The UN intended international humanitarian presence as something to build the capacity of the country to address their own their situation long term. It wasn't intended as a long term presence. It wasn't intended to provide social services. There are other elements that do that. But international humanitarian presence is expanding too wildly and widely across Africa.
Thank you, Sister Choice Ufuoma, for that. But still, as you said, you have mentioned it, more and more African countries are, begging and crying for it instead of, having an exit plan or having a plan how to get out of this at all. And of course, recently, the Global Humanitarian Insight had the report, more than 50% of the countries who need that humanitarian assistance are African countries. And of course, the Horn of Africa is in it. And there is something that I did not understand is, there is Ethiopia in the Horn, there is Somalia, there is, and then again, there is like a country, it's called a Horn of Africa. That doesn't overlap. What does that mean? But if you can just quickly answer that. But also, okay, the leaders are there, they are stuck. But as a civil society organization, as an activist, as a media platform, what should be our contribution to get out of this? What should we do?
I will take this last question first. I think, for example, the 14 countries that are appealing, or 15, the ones you mentioned, the 50, I think there needs to be an exit strategy. There should be a team, a body, 3, 4, that will now look at the history of international humanitarian presence, look at what the achievements have been, then look at what needs to be in place for international actors to go out, and look at what could be localized. In some of these areas, we don't need international humanitarian actors. We just need national people. I think localization is what is really where we're going in the future. So I think a country that, let me take Nigeria. Nigeria, that's my home country. I can use it as an example. It just needs a body, and I'm going to push for that. So like media activists, we should take note of the 14 countries and keep an eye on them and advocate for our government to review their presence and look at what needs to be in place for those countries to leave. For the international actors to leave, so that national actors can take it on. Because crisis builds national strength and character. We are depriving countries too of some of the resources they need to develop. So the strategy to exit strategy must be in place. And I think most African countries must advocate too, and speak to their government to ensure that exit strategy is included into any humanitarian response plan for any country. So they have an exit strategy. It will say, this is the issue for this year. This is what needs to happen for us to hand everything over to the national entities. And we provide short-term support as necessary, but not just sit there for years and just we will wait it. Sometimes people wait for crisis to come. And that's why crisis eventually comes. So if you have them in the country, they need to rationalize. They're looking for how do we say we have an office of 80 people, 50 international, 50 national. The national would help you find problems. Everybody will find a problem. The international will be happy if they see anything. Tell us if there's any crisis so we have a job, we're here. That is the case for some. And an exit strategy will make us more relevant. We will be able to state exactly what our impact is. We had the World Humanitarian Summit some years ago, and this was a global event. It was organized by OCHA, a very good one. And one of the outcomes from the Global South is that, please, we do not want to identify successful humanitarian presence as a huge long-term one. We want it to be defined by an exit. So we can only say this has been successful when they leave. So the advocacy in terms of monitoring the impact of international humanitarian appeals. Who is appealing? We're not talking about the countries that are appealing. Let advocate and make them people aware of what this means. And for me, this is what I believe I'm doing. I have an activist a part of my work as well. So it's raising awareness of what this means, and letting people know what this means. And so that people hold us accountable to our role in their country, to how long we stay, why we're staying, why we're not exiting, why we're there long term. So that is what is to make our leaders aware. And I think once they know we have an eye on this, it will cease to be a quiet little thing, because I think it had existed as something the West did for Africa for a long time. So most Westerners knew of it. Then you had Africans like us who worked in it, and most of us just felt it's our job, that's the way it should be. It shouldn't be the way it should, that's not the way it should be. We all make it work for the whole world. That's what the United Nations is for. That's what international organizations are for. We work for the whole world. We fight for a world of equality. We ensure we do not continue to promote, neocolonialism through a mode of operation in a country. So that's the first one in terms of the horn. I don't know how to answer that, because there's different names around there. There's some overlap, you're right. East Africa, the Horn, there's some overlap. We have the same issue in West Africa where they call it the Sahel, so it's just naming. But what I can say, Somalia is another country that's been on the humanitarian radar for close to over 20 years. It's going close to 30, and yeah, I mean, there are some contexts where we can say, okay, you know, we need some presence, but there are some we can say we don't. We don't. And we will know that when we keep our eyes on the ball. Through networks like yours, through outlets like yours, what you're doing now is critical. We just need to not forget after a while. Because look at Ethiopia, your country. Ethiopia has been fighting very hard to throw away the charity tag from itself. You've been working. This is in spite of how brilliant Ethiopians are around the world. Some of the people hitting Wall Street, making their marks are Ethiopians around the world. Some of the most successful impact. And it's the same thing about your country. It's beautiful. This is where I vacation when I need a break, But Ethiopia has struggled to remove that cloak of charity from the 80s from its head. And when I came on board to support in the El Nino drought, that was the first thing we stopped. You could already see the reference. And we said, no, let's put that aside. That is not what this is about. And we fought to ensure that they didn't make that connection. And Ethiopia continues to. And I remember I attended another meeting with an American, just a white man, really touched. And we had to speak at a donor meeting. And the donor was basically saying, we're not funding development issues, we're just funding humanitarian. So this American stood up. He said, I was here about 29 years ago to work in Ethiopia. I've raised my kids. It's still the same language. It's development. He spoke so passionately. We need to move away. And he heard Ethiopians wanting to share that clock off. And that's why having a huge international humanitarian presence in Ethiopia, of course, was not, I keep on saying, was not necessarily the smartest. Because this is a context that automatically brings out that memory. And then you have us, of course, we're going to be thinking, are they going to have an IDP? Is there going to be an IDP crisis? Oh, in 3 months. Of course, or two locusts flew by. So there's a local. I mean, you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
The condition. I keep on saying, when you build it, it will come. If you create that context, you will have a crisis, and have people will come to help you, quote unquote.
Yeah. Uh, I just want to remind our viewers that you coming here and spelling these truths, you work still for the United Nations. And we have seen in the past few months, especially as an Ethiopian, I can say that people, let alone speaking like this on a media, even those who spoke anonymously and still, try to support Ethiopia, not Ethiopia, but because we have the just cause, because there wasn't so much necessary all the propaganda as they have been saying on the so-called international media, who defied that, who said that the reality on the ground is actually different. They have been fired from their work. It costed their work. Now you are here, you're using your platform. That's where I got you, from the social media on LinkedIn. I read your posts and I was very interested. I was, besides the truth, I was so interested that you're so courage, you're so brave, and you are still working, and you know what the consequence might be. But you are seeing totally this from a different angle. And I like how you say, I am the United Nations. It's what we make of it. It's not that I am working for it. So just elaborate that, because we have seen, I tell you exactly why I'm saying this. When this investigative journalist from Canada came and investigated the atrocities that has been committed by TPLF in the war-torn place, and he took those, he interviewed places, and then he talked to the head of the IOM and another African woman. So on now it's public, so but it was on base of anonymous. So his device was stolen from the airport, and those people were fired. But also through his article, what I learned is actually there are many Ethiopians and others who are working and who know exactly what the UN, that specific humanitarian organization, is doing, how many false reports are coming just to label Ethiopia, but they were afraid to speak. So there should be something that they have to learn from you. I'm not saying anybody have to leave their job, but I also believe we cannot get our freedom for free. There should be a price that we have to pay. I mean, we cannot sell our dignity and freedom and a country just because of our income.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing I'm saying here that I think the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has not said about Ethiopia. In fact, when I was serving, he came twice, and we had high-level events where he spoke. He spoke so warmly and proudly of Ethiopia, on how Ethiopia was a bastion of stability on the region, how Ethiopia is impact. This is Ethiopia that has been hosting refugees for years. Ethiopia has been very generous to the world and a bastion of stability in this region. So he spoke very highly, and for me, I believe it's what we look at and what we want to see. There are many people who I feel the UN can be comfortable with for bureaucrats, who don't want to get engaged or involved. But it should be balanced with others who actually think things through, are willing to get their hands dirty and make the UN work. I want to work in a UN that is working. And that means I work. I've worked in some of the most difficult duty stations. I've almost lost my life in some missions. I've been there. I've sacrificed myself, the sacrifice that put my son at risk. I'm a single parent. I have sacrificed to do my work, to work with the UN, to make the UN work, to make the UN relevant in the world. And my speaking and acting this way is exactly that's the purpose. Is making the UN relevant, making the UN accessible in terms of its impact, making the UN our UN for all of us that is dynamic, effective, and young people can respect. I'm hoping the UN will not, I will not sleep at night. If anybody had the perception that I'm working comfortably with not speaking out for an organization that may be perceived in a certain way, I want to play my role and investing in making the UN the kind of organization the next generation will be proud to. And I'm hoping there'll be more people from who will do the same until we get the UN as an institution for us all. So yeah, I'm very often when I speak out when I see good initiatives from the UN. When I see some action that have been taken, I speak out as well. In this particular one, I'm speaking out regarding the international humanitarian presence. So what I've said about Ethiopia, Antonio Guterres has said it. He said it. I saw him on the podium. He said it. The Secretary General of the UN has said all the positive things I've said about Ethiopia. And Abiy Ahmed got a Nobel Peace Prize for what he did. It was recognized. All these are done publicly. So why can't we talk about it? Why must we keep quiet? Now, in the conflict in Ethiopia, which I've watched, and in mine, I have my very strong opinions, but I watch it because I do not understand the political underpinning. I'm not involved in politics at all, so I don't go there. But where I challenge Ethiopia is that it has allowed annual, every year humanitarian presence for over 20 years. Something's got to give eventually. So, it needs to monitor it, it needs to watch it, it needs to plan exit strategy, ensure there's longer, more sustainable action plan for the drought affected areas so that we can check malnutrition. It needs to start putting those elements in place. But I can say this confidently, Ethiopia will emerge from this well stronger because you can see characters are being built, passion is coming. Ethiopians love their country, and I think that love will pull the country through, and you have a great leader at the moment. So I'm very hopeful, in midst of all this. I'm hopeful because we came forward. There was the perception. There were pictures being doctored, of course, as the conflict, which fueled it. I think it fueled it, and I think in reflecting, we need to watch the media. The role of the media in Africa's matters need to be challenged, and it was challenged robustly in this case. We didn't come on board too early, but when Ethiopians came on board and started recognizing the untruth that was being pushed in the West, they spoke up. There were marches in London. What you
Yeah.
name it, they spoke up. That is Ethiopia. That's the Ethiopians. That's why Ethiopia will emerge from this even stronger. You see. Thank you.
Yeah. Speaking of Ethiopia, you are here currently. It's your vacation, it's your holiday time.
Yeah.
So you came with your family to Ethiopia by choice, right? By choice. And
Yes.
you could
Ethiopia.
have been anywhere in Europe, you could have been anywhere in the Northern America or anywhere in the world, and anywhere in Africa for that matter. But for you to be here in Ethiopia at the time where Ethiopia is defamed, and labeled that needs as a humanitarian crisis, and the Western countries advised their people to leave their country, to leave Ethiopia, and you still chose to be there. I mean, it's not just any other holiday. Yes, you have been there so many times, but it's not any other. This is a special. As an Ethiopian, I speak for Ethiopia now. Okay, as an Ethiopian, I cannot just this let it pass by. It means a lot, and before I get emotional and say things on behalf of you, why Ethiopia at this time?
I mean, I spent this new year here. Because I like being around in the on September around December 7th, but I was here last year for the New Year too, for the Christmas season. I love Ethiopia. I've always said it. I started coming to Ethiopia about it's should I say about 15 years ago. I've come regularly, and I brought my son first when he was I think 6, 7. He's here with me, and I adopted another grown big boy, but I call him my son. Easy, Ethiopia. I love Ethiopia. My son loves Ethiopia. Before we got here, he was in school. I was in Canada with him. And she said, Mom, can we come to Ethiopia? I said, yes. When we just hopped on the plane. We knew we were going to be here, but I had to go there first for something. And we came. I love Ethiopia. There's something about the spirit, the air, that calms me. There's a kindness and there's peace. As a single mother raising my son here, I was really grateful to Ethiopia because of the sense of security and safety. This was one place I served. In all the duty stations I've served in, that I knew my son was safe. And my son we were here for 4 years, 5 years. As a young, he was safe. Ethiopians took him as theirs. He was safe. The beautiful people, Ethiopians, I think some of the most beautiful people in the world are here. That's it. Sometimes you love a place, you can't put your words in it, describe it. It's a feeling. But it's the peace, it's the spirituality, the genuine spirituality. I feel the peace and very comfortable. I've stayed in some of the most beautiful accommodation with the best hospitality in Addis Ababa. Period. This is a place where the hospitality is tops. It's clean. It just meets my need. It meets my need in terms of what I value. Yes, I like comfort. I get it here. It's a very comfortable place. In fact, sometimes they are too generous in terms of the hospitality, the service, and the weather. And the weather. Ethiopia just has the most beautiful climate. The weather I love, you can hear me. I love the
Yeah,
country.
I see it.
I love the
I
country.
hear it.
I
I
still
see.
worked here, but I've been coming back as a tourist just to visit, not for work purpose. Just to visit, yeah.
No, but yeah, we have to thank you, really thank you, not for the whole interview, but I'm just saying thank you for this specific thing, for standing in solidarity with Ethiopians, for standing. Ethiopia is fighting an African war right now. The war has evolved into something else. So we are fighting an African war, and to stand in solidarity with Ethiopians, it it means a lot. It
Thank you.
means a lot. And
Thank you so much, Malet. Thank you.
yeah, it's hard not to be emotional while I speak this, because I interviewed a couple of months ago, and there was this guy from Germany who actually refused when he was told to leave the country by his embassy, and he saw, because they see people more and more are going, and how he was welcomed and hugged, and how people were expressing their love when he refused and stayed, from by the taxi driver, people on the street, in the restaurant. So I know what it means for Ethiopians right now, people when stand in solidarity, and this is exactly what we need in Africa. I mean, the rise and fall of Kenya will affect Ethiopia. The rise and fall of Nigeria will affect the eastern part of the continent. So when you rise, I rise. When you
Yes.
fall, I also fall. So we should stand for each other and support each other. That should be, that's what we should harness and nurture into the next generation. Thank you very much, Sister Ufuoma. But I'll give the opportunity, for any closing words, for our viewers, for Africans, in terms of related what we have spoken, or in general, how we can keep this continent.
Yes. We should. Africa is our time. This is our time. Anybody who knows now know this is where it's at. We must not give up on the continent, and the resources are all here. we must ask questions. There's too much effort these days to just leave the country, leave the continent, just migrate, go away. That's no solution anymore. There are many people who are living in undignified lives in those parts of the world. Africa has so much, but it's what we make of it. We can't just let it dormant. It's what we make of it. Let's come in. Let's reflect. Let's think about how African countries circulate out there globally. We want to make sure we are represented in dignity, in ways that we invite, direct investment, in ways that would support our development and our growth, because we are on a good path. The good things, the great things are happening here right now. Let's not let anybody take our attention away from it. I love this continent. Yeah, I'm a Pan-Africanist, unapologetically so.
Thank you. Yeah. And this is you are on the right place. This is a Pan-African media platform. So for those of us who see me, like being emotional and supporting my guests here, this is not something that to hear both sides. This is here. This media is to support, to bring Pan-African agenda and to promote those agendas. So I am unapologetically Pan-Africanist, and that's why I am here, and this is why we have this media platform. And just to throw a few words, please, for our viewers, for anyone who claims to be a Pan-African, this might, I know for lots of you who knows me, this might sound a cliche, but please work on the next generation. Invest on your children. Teach them. They don't get it from education. So you have to teach them. Teach them what to be a Pan-African. Show them by example. Be a Pan-African yourself. Buy African. Buy local products. Teach them the history of Africa doesn't start from slavery. Africa has its own kingdom and kingdom. Slavery just happened, an interruption in our history. And you have to tell them those history, when Africa was great and how we are going to be great again. So yeah, lead by example. And otherwise we find ourselves in this vicious circle. If we don't invest on the next generation, on the children, then again we have to deal with them when they're adults. So it will be on and on, again and again. So please, lead by example, be a Pan-African, be the change. And thank you very much, Sister Ufuoma, to have you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was just a privilege and pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Same here. All right. Thank you. Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.